have a most esteemed guest. His name is Major General Eitan Dangot. Before I introduce General Dangot, I just want to thank all of you for tuning in, and all of you who are listening to this in the postcast and in the podcast and via YouTube, and of course, those who have dialed into the live webinar as well. And I want to express my profound thanks to Rosita Panini, the co-founder and COO of the Miriam Institute, and also to our great and powerful colleague, Alan Langer, for bringing this together. Thank you so very much, Alan. We appreciate it. The individual with whom I will be speaking is well known to me. He's well known to our organization. He became involved with our work when our precursor was the vehicle through which we worked. That was Our Soldiers Speak. And we had the great privilege of bringing him to the United States to lecture. He lectured in New York for us. He also lectured in upstate New York. He also lectured at the Naval War Academy in Rhode Island. And we are very, very pleased to be joined by Major General Eitan Dangot. He concluded his extensive career as the coordinator of government activities in the territories in 2014. And prior to that post, he served as the military secretary to 3 ministers of defense, Shaul Mofaz, Amir Peretz, and Ehud Barak. He holds a BA in economics and computer science and an MBA, both from Bar-Ilan University. Now, before we get going, and this is why I'm always grateful to the people who are on the live session, I wanted to speak to my great and powerful colleague, Alan Langer, because I'm getting a text message to my phone, Alan, that the people who are dialing in by phone, not the web, cannot hear me. So if you can play around with that and try and remedy that as we go on, I would be very, very pleased to see that situation fixed. And I also, Alan, want to ask you to just put a quick advert or point of information out there to let people know how they can ask a question live, if you would.
Absolutely. So I will get to work on that sound. So there should be, for the people that are dialing in via the internet or logging in via the internet, there's a Q&A option at the bottom of your screens. You click on that, you submit a question, and it will be entered into the queue and answered live. This does not preclude the people who asked questions before from having their questions answered and who sent them in when they RSVP'd.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to just send this to the individual. Bear with me, General Dangot. I just want to get the individual who wants to dial in sorted out as well. Okay. Alan, could you please look at your cell phone and send the web dial in to the person that I just text over to you? Is that okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Just send that individual the way that they can dial in through the internet and then obviate the problem of the phone dial-in that they're experiencing. So just do that. So with that having been said, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you again for your patience. General Dangot, it's a pleasure to have you here. Let's begin, first of all, by asking you a couple of important questions. I always like people to know the background of the individual from whom we have the privilege of learning and engaging with. So tell us very briefly, where were you born, where were you raised, where do you currently live, and a little bit about your life that doesn't feature on the brief bio that I read out.
Okay, thank you, Benjamin. It's always a pleasure to be hosted by you and your organization. I'm, as you know, Major General retired or reserve, as we see it. I was born in 1960 in Tel Aviv. My father came to Israel from Poland after the Holocaust. My mother, who passed away, was born in Tel Aviv. And we, a family of another 2 sisters, and I was educated in Tel Aviv, joined the IDF at 1978, starts at pilot course, and as we say, once a pilot, become a gunner. So I joined later to the artillery corps, and then there I made my career as an artillery officer. Start, I think, a very important, fulfill important task on 1982 in First Lebanon War, when I was landed with the paratroopers brigade in the north part of Lebanon, and my battery was fighting in a direct fire as an artillery with the paratroopers. Later on, I became also a commander of this battalion, and I served a lot, of course, all the missions, Lebanon, Gaza Strip, and the West Bank. I made some jobs according to my career at the Field Artillery School, and I was there another task of commander. I became later on as a way of stop and studied a lot to be a military attaché in a very young age, as 31 and a half, in the Benelux country, Netherlands, Belgium, for the NATO. And later on, I've promoted as a colonel and filled some jobs in the Field Artillery School as the commander and in the plan department and the IDF staff in Tel Aviv. Later, I became the Director General or the Head of Staff in the Home Front Command in the Second Gulf War. And from there, as you mentioned, I was as the military secretary for 3 ministers of defense. I think I'm holding the record of fulfilling this job for more than 5 years, a lot of history, last history. And then I become the COGAT, coordinator of the government activities. But the main important, Benjamin, is that I have a wonderful 4 children. I'm also a grandfather of the first baby that my elder daughter had, and my wife is a teacher in Israel.
Wonderful. And whereabouts are you living in Israel?
Today I'm living in Netanya, and I'm doing few things. I'm as the president of the gas producing companies that has become the main energy source to Israel's energy. And I'm doing other things in the security field and in another private sectors.
Great. So the title of this conversation, Eitan, I can call you Eitan, obviously.
Of course.
As you've given me permission to do in the past. The title of this conversation is really a question. Is the application of sovereignty really worth it? Now, this is something that has been discussed many, many times. A lot of people have weighed in on it. But I really wanted to get your perspective, frankly, because of a number of conversations you and I have had privately about this issue, but also just because of the sheer breadth of knowledge that you've had, not only as the commander of government activities in the territories. And to put that into context for our listeners, that means that you coordinate the activities between the State of Israel and the Israel Defense Forces, not one or the other, and the Palestinian Authority and even the Gaza Strip since Hamas came into rule there. You've done all of that, but you also have this great strategic outlook by dint of the fact that you were the military secretary to 3 ministers of defense. And I remember seeing and looking into your background and learning more about you and watching you on a chopper right there with Minister of Defense Ehud Barak as his eyes and ears and source. And you really do have a very unique understanding from a strategic point of view. So let's start with this question. The application of sovereignty is something that made its way into the general conversation prior to the last run of elections. It wasn't really a hot issue prior to that. I want you to explain, and I've asked because I know you can speak about any subject for hours, given your breadth of knowledge, but I want you to explain, why did the issue of the application of sovereignty find its way into the Israeli and frankly international conversation at that point? What propelled it to the forefront?
I think that the reasons are quite known. And as you know, we are after many tries of negotiation between us and the Palestinians. I was a part of it as the military secretary to the Minister of Defense, few of them. And also I was a partner as the coordinator of the government activities lately to Obama's second presidential time with Secretary Kerry, if you remember. I think he was the last one who made the process. And all of them, since Ehud Barak was Prime Minister, Camp David, and even before, were failed. And mostly they were failed because of few topics that the Palestinians didn't agree and has not agreed and will not agree to talk about them under the situation that the Americans were at that time under Obama's, or it was under the Republicans. And I mean about 4 to 5 subjects. First of all, the issue of Jerusalem. Secondly, the border of the east border to Israel among Jordan, and the demand for a right of return, and also about the settlements. I think all the other topics could be solved in a very quick, and there was a lot of negotiation. And if you are looking about the present situation with Abu Mazen legacy, he will not be the first Palestinian leader, which in his legacy will be mentioned. He agreed to give up the demand for return and another issue. So we come to a very complicated and block junction. And according to these circumstances, the situation that we got a president with a policy as President Trump, and with other developments at the Middle East, with modern Arab countries and with a clear threat to our region, I mean to modern Arab Sunnist countries, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Gulf countries, and ever, the Middle East has been changed. So when you are taking this kind of topics together, you come to a mechanism which can bring you to talk about this subject. And if you, Benjamin, compare it, when did Israel made something similar to this? It was done in 1981 when Menachem Begin was the prime minister and declared it about the Golan Heights. We were, I don't remember such a tense in Israel that time, but now, Benjamin, can we look about the Golan Heights without the sovereignty of Israel on it? What will be there in a situation that now Iran, Hezbollah, and the situation, the Golan Heights near the border? So I think when you get tired from this block junction with the Palestinians and you have a very right reason to make it in these circumstances, in my opinion, the only reason that worth to take calculating risks and to bring it to opportunity is only declaration about the east border of Israel near the Jordan Valley. It's need for Israel's security for the future, especially at this time of development in the Middle East. And it is, I think, one of the only topics that you can find a full agreement or majority of agreement in the Israeli society for this step. It's need for Israel's security. But since it was declared something at the beginning or in the middle of this, before the election, the third time of the election, till, let's say, 1.5 months ago, 1 month ago, it was looking something that can be judged on a reality way. But today, as you have to be pragmatic in your decisions to judge, to assess the situation different way, I think that today we have to freeze it, we have to wait with it, because now the Israel state has other majority priorities to take with them deal under this kind of a process, especially emphasizing that it looks like that I don't think or see very sure, to be modest a little bit, that we are able to do it. And also we got for this step the support of the United States. If you are taking into account Jordan policy, United States in this time of the situation now, and to make a small step like declare of the block of Gush Etzion or block of Ma'ale Adumim, I think it's not worth, because who will tell us as Jewish on this country that Gush Etzion is not belong to any kind of the future of the Israeli state? So when you are making such a step, taking calculating risk, you can do it only for one major step, as declare your sovereignty on the Jordan Valley.
Okay, so I knew this was going to happen with you, Eitan. I absolutely knew that what was going to occur was that I would ask you a question and you would present a whole strategic overview with each issue being its own subject. I knew it. And I'm pleased that you have done, because it's so important. I don't think most people recognize what you're drilling down into, and I want to go through it step by step. So number one, you are for, in principle, the application of sovereignty only if it results in the affixing, the permanent affixing of Israel's eastern border, correct? That's where it's strategically worthwhile. That's what you're for. If it fails to do that, in other words, if it applies sovereignty not to the Jordan Valley, but rather to communities in Judea and Samaria like Gush Etzion, Ma'ale Adumim, and so forth, you say that's not worth it because the strategic goal should be the eastern border. Is that correct?
Yes. And above it,
yeah,
you cannot not to be on a reality situation. Things has been changing dramatically in the last 3-4 weeks in Israel.
Yes.
The corona returned for the second round. This is a great threat on the level of medical or health situation, and above all economy to the Israel society. Secondly, besides the corona, we have to keep a strong IDF with men of its 3-4 arms, Air Force, intelligence, and the ground corps and Navy that will be able to fulfill very sensitive missions this time. And what is the sensitive? Is the threat that is coming strategically to Israel from Iran. In 3 points, among the border in Syria, in Tehran itself or in Iran itself on producing the nuclear weapon system by Iran, and the third, for supplying a long-range missiles in a direct capacity to Hezbollah, and that is mean a great threat. And besides the fact that I expect, or my estimation, that the IDF will fulfill a strong and important mission by helping the people in Israel, the civilians, to overcome on the corona. We build a structure for it that depend on the home front command. We will need a strong forces to assist help to the level of the civilian, and it's not, you cannot be blind not to say we have to keep IDF also in health situation. Now coming to the tactics, I will not like to see soldiers with masks and are fighting for their health, running after Palestinians in the West Bank that are also ill. It means now we find another scenario that with the situation that the Jordan Valley looks far away than it was before, I think the priorities of the Israeli government should and have to change for the coming months. If you want once to try, we can do it. And I would like to share with you something also that I heard it from the Palestinians themselves. Israel and the PA has the same problem with the corona and the economy. The both entities that are living together, more than 400,000 Israeli civilians in the West Bank, and more than 2.6 million people, Palestinians as they call, in the West Bank, are looking to keep the situation under control with economy. So there is a common interest. And I know for sure, if you give today, and I based it on a direct talk with former and the present Palestinian leaders that sometimes are calling me, and they told me, if we get one sign, not directly from the Prime Minister, from other, that you are going to frozen it, we will immediately return to the same coordination of civil and military to keep the area together. We are ready to sit with you and ask them again of renew the negotiation without any pre-demand.
Okay, so you've spoken with a lot there that's very interesting. I want to try and get to all of it, but I want to first, let's put a pin in COVID-19 for a moment, and definitely in Iran, and let's make sure that we hit both of those subjects before the end of the call. I want you to just explain to everybody the other reasons that you are of the view that only if they apply sovereignty to the Jordan Valley should this go ahead. Number one, we've dealt with the issue of not applying sovereignty just to Ma'ale Adumim or Gush Etzion. It's not worth it in your viewpoint. You need to affix an eastern boundary. So I want that to be clear. But let me continue, Eitan, because I want to run through this thing. You also made a really important point that I think a lot of people have questions about, which is the viewpoint of America vis-a-vis its own policy with regard to the Jordan Valley seems to have changed. It seems to be that they were all for it, and now them moving away from it, or suddenly a bit cooler about extending sovereignty over the Jordan Valley. Why is that important? Why does that matter when it comes to Israel's decision making?
Listen, Benjamin, first of all, I look very serious to each achievement of sovereignty, even for Ma'ale Adumim. But you know, in such a case, when you are taking a decision, it's not just to sit and talking between Benjamin and Eitan and to decide. It has a real impact of all the region we are living with. So let's look about Jordan. Jordan is the goalkeeper for preventing Iran to enter and make the threat to Israel from the three-angle point meeting on the border between Israel, Syria, and Jordan till Eilat. I will not see there any kind of Shiite militias that can be a scenario if the kingdom of Jordan is coming very weak. Secondly, Jordan and Israel and Egypt has created a new, let's say, block of coordination of energy resources. It means not making something you are giving to someone for 1 month. We sign an agreement between Israel, Egypt, and Israel, Jordan to supply gas for their energy, for their country, for the coming 20 years, 1 generation from now. Can you see it not a strong way to make sure this is the great winner that we succeed to build something new for us? But at the same time, as the corona economy situation is creating threats to our country and others, and also making big damage in Iran, you see that the entity of Tehran is not wasting a minute. With thousands of people who are dying in the streets, with a very great break of economic crisis, they continue to push for moving ahead their unconventional program of creating nuclear threat to Israel. On the other hand, trying to arm their proxy as Hezbollah on the border. So where you will put your efforts in this kind of complicated area when you have responsibility that every child in Israel will get nowadays the treatment that he has to. Every civilian in Israel will get the food for his future. And we are talking about 1 million people unemployment. And if you are talking about it, and with the threat from Iran, you make priorities and you will have another opportunity. The time is running. You are coming close and close to the elections in the United States. And I think the point that some of the main players that I just mentioned were waiting to see the results. Iran has a lot of hopes to make a new circle like they made the agreement with Obama in 2015. If Trump is there, I think the main enemy for Israel and for the Western world will be in a great problem. Also, the same looking is from the Arab modern countries for it. So if Trump is staying, I think we will have opportunity to come to the Palestinians and tell them for another timing, look, if you are not coming and solve this 1, 3, 4 problems, we will not move ahead. And I will tell you something. I'm talking about the day after Abu Mazen, because in Abu Mazen time, he will not leave us this area as the first Palestinian leader, which is in legacy, will be written that he gave something for this move ahead, the peace process.
Okay, so I want to deal with that issue now. You've spoken again about the moderate Arab states and the improvement of ties that we need to look for, the coordination around energy sources that will enrich the entire region potentially. You've also spoken about the need to not overly exert the Israel Defense Forces. It can only do so many things. There's an idea of many people, particularly in the diaspora, that the IDF can face down anything at all times in any event. But the truth of the matter is we have limited resources and we have to pick our priorities. Now let me come to the Palestinians, because I'm frankly, it's only my view, but I'm completely bemused by what I keep hearing about this issue. Why on earth would anybody play into the hands of the Palestinian Arabs, who, since the Trump peace proposal was even mentioned, forget about it being unveiled, since first it was mentioned that Donald Trump was going to work on some sort of a peace proposal, immediately rejected it. They immediately said they will not meet with the negotiating team of Greenblatt, Kushner, Friedman. They rejected any overtures, publicly or privately, until such time as the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, said, I am going to, on July 1st, apply sovereignty over the Jordan Valley. And then, surprise, surprise, on May 28th, 29th, 30th, June 28th, 29th, 30th, suddenly there's a missive that comes from the Palestinian Authority saying, we're willing to sit down and to negotiate with you. Now, I have seen...
I have a simple answer.
I just want to finish my question so that everybody knows where I'm coming from. I have seen this movie before. I have seen it before, and frankly, I think that anyone can be fooled once, but we should not be expected to be fooled twice. There was a freeze on all building in the communities in Judea and Samaria, proposed by President Barack Obama, acceded to and then promoted by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It went on for 10 months, and not a single thing progressed, not a single thing. Why should this be different? Why is Israel not moving according to its own clock and its own considerations?
You mentioned very important things. I was responsible for that 10 months of freezing, and I was in the field in the West Bank. I had to deal and make all the activities to make it. And this is another story, but I would like to say that that was to be proud on the democratic way, how we succeed to talk with the settlers and to come to a way that I made some changes that I brought it to the Prime Minister and Ehud Barak that they make a change, and we passed it without moving. Look, I will start, maybe I will surprise you with one sentence for the most of your question, and then I will make it large. About your question, the Palestinians made a terrible mistake from their point of view by rejecting the Trump program and not giving it a chance. They thought as they are going at that policy that they declare, they will get points in the in international community. And if you ask me, and I know them and talking with them, I think they are trying today, and there are some channels of return talking with the United States, even it is not officially. I think that a phone call between Abu Mazen and Trump will be in the moment if our Prime Minister will declare about, for example, freezing this kind of process, it will be immediately. They are waiting to know, and it will be different because they will wait for the elections. If election comes and Trump's presidential will enter to his second period, I believe they will cooperate in another because they lose a lot. And what is the main reason? The PR is afraid to lose its entity that will be crushed. And I'm telling you, as the word that I heard it from high officials from the PA, let's say one of the top 4 that are talking with me, half of them, let's say, they told me they don't want to be crushed. And the moment, even if Israel is doing a small step, it will be the end of the PA authorities, and they don't want to be there. They want to continue to hold and to control the life in the West Bank. What does it mean? Not even because of the step itself, for example, of declaring of Ma'ale Adumim, it's because the population of the West Bank in these circumstances of their problem of economy, the Hamas will find a gap to enter and try to break their entity by itself. It is, and I think they're right, it will be the direction of the end of the PA. The question that I'm asking myself, even I support, of course, that I will be in the Jordan border or in other places, I think that the solution is only economical, full autonomy to the Palestinians, that you can make something of mechanism like this with full responsibility of Israel for the security. This is my simple, but to build it, you need a timetable. They prefer it. But on the other end, I don't think that in the coming very near future, with all I remind, this is the time to invest manpower, a lot of budget, a lot of risk of health and others, according to what's going with the Iranian, make priorities. I studied one thing when I was commander in the field, let's say in the West Bank, and I had to arrest people that I had the intelligence that are making terrorism. Sometimes we came to a situation that I told my soldiers, wait, they will be in our hands, but the price for it, the loss of price for us will be very limited. So wait 2-3 days and you will put your hand of this terrorist by surprise, and it will be much more safe for us. So timing, it's something unexpected, like we are talking about the recent developments. So we will have time, we will have to do it. But now the major threats that I just mentioned are much more higher, and I think we can find a common interest to give a chance to the Palestinian authorities by under the umbrella of the Americans.
Okay, so I want to ask 2 other things about the peace plan, and then I'd like to leave some time to talk about Iran, because I think that's
Don't forget Hamas, Benjamin.
I'm coming to that actually, Eitan.
Okay.
Very, very much indeed. So before I ask about Hamas as part of the peace plan, let me ask you a question about the President of the United States of America. So this peace plan, look, Eitan, I have this peace plan here. It doesn't leave my desk, whether it's here or whether it's in arm's length. I've read this peace plan. I personally advised the administration, along with Rosita and a number of others, about this peace plan. They didn't follow the advice that we gave. You're aware of the advice that we gave. You know very well the direction that we were going. But the reality of the matter is that if you look at this peace plan, it gives away more than any other plan has given away. And I'm going to show that on the screen for everybody to see. But it hides behind this idea that Israelis shouldn't worry because it's heavily conditioned on the Palestinians changing their behavior, right? They must stop terrorism. They must recognize the state of Israel. They must do this. The PA has to take over the Gaza Strip again. There are any number of things that are conditions that everybody says, don't worry about what the peace plan's trying to extract from Israel, because it'll never happen, because that behavioral change will never occur. And then we see in the news just 3 or 4 days ago that actually the American administration is saying you cannot apply sovereignty unless you give some sort of a good faith concession to the Palestinians. Now, this is without any change whatsoever in the behavior of the Palestinian Arabs, either the Palestinian Authority, which in my opinion is a terror group unable to bring about terror activities at the moment, or Hamas, which in everybody's view is an out-and-out terrorist group. What is it that gives you the confidence that in a second term Trump presidency, when the president no longer needs the evangelical vote, and when the president can pursue a foreign policy to build a legacy, what makes you think that that is a more reliable partner for Israel rather than a less reliable partner? Why are you so confident?
I'm not so confident. Things can change, but if you are looking at the basic things of concept, of principle, I think that the Trump program is the best for sure that Israel as a state can start such a program. And as let's say, time that I spent and in the past with it, I saw many years of wasting time by such kind of Americans, let's say, that belong to Bush presidential or to Obama. And I think it's a plan that gives you a start. Each plan that you start with it is not the end results that you are coming to the end. It means that between the basic principles that you are start and to the end of this process, you will find the results. The long way is the short way, but it gives you like the player in a different way that save a lot of months that we wasted the past of the talking with the Palestinians, like there is a big wall and they are not listening. And the basic principles that President Trump put in this program is the main, I think, achievement that Israel could get from any president in the United States. But I think, and this is why the Palestinians made a great mistake, that if you are going to the 1/3 of this process, to the half of this process, you will find points that for the Palestinians are very, very, I think, positive, that I'm against them, but I have to live with it in such a way of negotiation. So the start, I think, put the Palestinian, let's, guys, listen, come. If you are not start from here, go away, we will not give you the support. Don't forget the economical support and all the things that they got from the Americans.
Through that
But,
and so on,
yeah, and that helped a lot Abu Mazen to build, I'm from that part, is structure for his life. So it's not so bad for the Palestinians. There is a lot of minds for Israel inside this program, and you just mentioned. But as you are making something, of course you have to give up for something. I'm not optimistic that the Palestinians will agree for it, but let's start to move. If we not start to move, we have to stay at the beginning of what Trump said. It's like where Abu Mazen demand for Benjamin, that he made a condition to Israel to renew the negotiation only from the end part that he made from Olmert in his last days as prime minister. And it was a very bad circumstances to Israel. Now he withdrew. He said, I have no demands, let's sit and start. So it made a shake. I think the Palestinians studied, and their cap is to lose the entity or to start to change their way, and especially if Trump is staying in this position. So time will tell it, but I think for us is even a great achievement. It's something that we couldn't expect to get from American president till these days that give us the chance to move ahead with this kind of complication, but in a right way that we demand with all the other negotiations concerning especially security and of course historical. For example, Jerusalem will be and will stay forever the full capital of Israel.
Okay, so just so that our audience knows this, and And Eitan, thank you so much for answering my questions. You know, a lot of people that I ask them the questions, they try and avoid them. And let's keep that going. We're going to finish this at 1:45 p.m. New York time. So that's in half an hour. Okay. So I want to just deal with the peace plan on a couple of quick points, and then I want to move. And I'm going to include Hamas. Now, before I do that, I want to ask my great and powerful colleague, Alan, for the benefit of everyone and also for you, Eitan, I want you, Alan, please, to show us the conceptual map of this plan, please, on the screen. Can you bring it up? Eitan, I know you know it like the palm of your hand, but others don't. Okay, can you get rid of this border, Alan, or is this the best that we've got? Alan, can you get rid of this border, or is this the best we've got in terms of this document and all that sort of stuff going on?
This is the best we got.
Okay, great. Can you start? So, ladies and gentlemen, I just want you to see this map because there is this idea, and I'm putting my view forward on this issue because I feel, frankly, it's not spoken about with sufficient vigor and focus. And so I ask you to indulge me. This map is not a principled map. This is a map that completely lacks principle. General, in my opinion, this map, General Dangot, are you with me?
Of course.
This map, in my opinion, has no principles whatsoever. None. Number one, I want you, Alan, to please point to this area in the Gaza Strip. This map calls for the enlargement of the Gaza Strip into the state of Israel, in areas where our people live, where our people farm, in areas that are not contested areas under any argument about the future of Israel, except for those extremists who want all of the state of Israel to be destroyed. And it's going to now create a situation where the Gaza Strip is potentially a terror base that already has more than 1 million citizens who, in my opinion, are not adequately secured, living in the south of Israel, who have faced rocket fire since 2005, since our last ridiculous withdrawal from land. It's going to enlarge that area, not just within the border of the state of Israel, but it's going to ensnare now Israel's southern residents to the west, the Gaza Strip, and now within Israel's border to the southwest as well. What on earth is wise about that policy? I mean, why are Israeli advisors not turning around and saying, because you made mention of this idea that you have to negotiate, any negotiation that I've studied only ends up gradually across time becoming worse for the state of Israel, not better. So in Oslo, people talked about an autonomy, a sub-state somewhere in Judea and Samaria for the Palestinians. Now, over time, everybody's talking about a state for the Palestinians. The situation doesn't improve for Israel with time. It actually ages to Israel's disadvantage. Why on earth would we give land, more land of the state of Israel, to the Gaza Strip?
You ask me?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Why would we do that, Eitan?
Listen, Benjamin, it's not the end of the negotiation. It's a start of putting principles. And I look at it not as the, let's say, where is the block of area that is suggested that will be Palestinians, but the swap issue is not something that are coming from the satellite. We are talking on it among all the negotiations. But as I told you, I think we don't have to deal on such a part till we are moving ahead to the other parts. That is the thing that, in my opinion...
General Dangot, can you move closer to the computer, please?
Yes, do you hear me?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, I said that according to the principles, it's not the end of the negotiation, it's only the start. Things can be raised or changed or some in a different way. But Benjamin, I would like to bring you back to what you said at the beginning, that you feel or you're listening to something new from Washington concerning the issue of telling, okay, let's start with this point for Israel, but you have to give something for the Palestinians. This is the way that for negotiation, always there are two sides. Listen, we are living end to end, back to back, with more than 2.7 million people every day in the West Bank. The majority of them are voting by legs, not to join terrorism. We are fighting against terrorism, against very limited groups of people. And look, we are talking about things that are developing in the Middle East, the Arab winter, and what happened in Syria. I think it's another opportunities. There are many bad things, but there are also good things when I'm looking about the future of my children, of my grandchildren, about my state, and about the future of the Jewish nation. So when you are looking on it, and on the swap issue, for example, let's say it can be limited. Let's say it can be, as your organization made, something that to me it was the beginning like imagination, and later on the reality of making this area in the Egyptian border, because of the interest in the Middle East is so dynamic. So when you start something, you don't know when it happened. And I will to negotiate among these preconditions supporting by the United States for towards the end that I have to apply, okay, I will deal for it, and we will see what will be. The end of this negotiation for sure will not be looked as the map. And another thing, we studied always that for getting something important for your future generations, you have to give something, but that helped me to promise the tools that will give me to hold a strong armed forces that will be able to keep Israel as the main strong country, as the cottage in this jungle around us, radius of 1,500 kilometers. And that is something that will help me a lot to strengthen my power to do it for the future. So I'm not afraid to sit and deal under these preconditions or principles. What is the other opportunity? The other opportunities is a mess. And would I like to make it? No, only as the last chance that I will have to do it.
Okay, so my last question, by the way, I need you to fix a little bit your sound because you're coming in and out, and I don't want people to miss your views and your opinions. So
now listen better?
Better, Eitan, yeah. So I just want to finish off with a quick point about Jerusalem, and then I'm going to move to Iran. So look, in this plan, Eitan, I know that the president stood up and said Jerusalem will be undivided, very important, the undivided capital of the state of Israel. That's not what the plan says. The plan says very, very clearly under this segment, page 16 of the plan, political status of Jerusalem. I'm going to quote it, and then I want to ask you a question about it. It says here, quote, a division of Jerusalem. Sorry, one moment. The other section. It's this section here. Okay. Yeah, it says Jerusalem will remain the sovereign capital of the state of Israel, and it should be an undivided city. The sovereign capital of the state of Palestine should be in the section of East Jerusalem, located in all areas east and north of the existing security barrier, including Kfar Aqab, the eastern part of Shuafat and Abu Dis, and could be named Al-Quds, or another name, as determined by the state of Palestine. Now that is wordsmithing at its worst. That is at one point saying Jerusalem is undivided, but by the way, we're about to divide it, and in East Jerusalem is where the capital of the Palestinian state will be. It also goes on to delineate further details about Jerusalem. Now, the reality of the matter is that it's calling for the division of Jerusalem. It's calling for the ceding of land in southern Israel to the Gaza Strip. It's calling for a state for the Palestinian Authority in Judea and Samaria. So what my question to you is as follows. It's very, very simple. What are Israelis not willing to put on the negotiating table?
I would like to talk about the issue of Jerusalem. I think that you just read that you are very expert in the details, but I read this program for once or twice, but Listen, Benjamin, Abu Dis was mentioned in Obama's presidential time also as the capital of Jerusalem, and Israel accepted. Another thing is what we will do with with some neighborhoods around Jerusalem that you were mentioned that today include in Jerusalem. And you know, I like to talk direct. If you are bringing the former mayors of Jerusalem and make an interview with them, I'm sure that most of them, even 100%, even they're coming or belong to the Likud party today or before, they will tell you that they would prefer to give up some of these neighborhoods because there is nothing to do to Jerusalem with these neighborhoods, with these thousands of Palestinians that are living there, not for the civil services, not from anything that feel connected to the town. So if we will take the big Jerusalem and we'll cut Akeb or something in the, I don't want to make names now, I support it in order to make it clear by some kind of a statement by the Palestinians that Jerusalem that belong to Israel is all the rest. Because even today we find out, and we have to make some, I think, brave steps also, not that are belong to the full 100% of ideologic way of talking, but to be pragmatic and to tell 1, 2, 3 neighbors we are giving. Do I need these people to be civilians of Israel? Why, in the moment they can be a part of the Palestinians, they will feel much more better there. There is no contact from the town to these cities, besides the fact that the municipality line is moving ahead. We are not entering there a lot. So I think this is what I called you pragmatic steps that you can find solutions for both sides. But what is the problem? The problem that Abu Mazen refused to agree to the fact that all the other area, the old city, it's the capital and the only capital of Israel. One thing I tell you that I feel in the atmosphere that more and more Arab countries, modern countries, are there to tell it or to say it in a way of loudly, something that you didn't see many years ago in the past. So if you ask me, we are very close, and what I told you is a timing to a time to do it. So if you start such a negotiation, and Israel will get for all the Arab countries that are waiting not to be under demonstrations in their squares by the people and move ahead with Israel to open new Middle East that will be strong against Iranian threat to all this area, we have opportunities. So we will deal with it. And I think in some places we can make some other kind of compromise that is something that country has to do it.
So the last 15 minutes or so, I want to come to Iran. I just want everybody to be aware that the goal of the Miriam Institute is to present different viewpoints. And you are really one of, in my opinion, in the opinion of our institute and Rosita, you are one of the most expert voices on the Israel-Palestinian issue and also on strategy writ large. And I'm very, very grateful to have, no, we really do mean that. And that's one of the reasons that I feel comfortable pushing you and challenging you. But I do want to say that I am an individual, just for what my view is worth to everybody, I'm an individual who moved from the United Kingdom in order to serve faithfully in the defense forces of the State of Israel. And I did serve. I served in the Second Lebanon War. I served in Operation Pillar of Defense. I served in Operation Eitan, a protective edge, as a combat soldier in all of those campaigns. And I did my reserve duty, and I vote, and I pay taxes. And I'm a citizen to every sense of the word. And I'm also a Jew, and I'm a very, very proud Jew. And I just want to say, from my viewpoint, and I'd like to be on the record for this, I find it tragic that Abu Mazen can say, I will not be the individual who gives up the rights of return, but the state of Israel cannot find a prime minister or leadership that will say, I am not willing to put Jerusalem on the altar for negotiation. I am not willing to give more land to the Palestinian Arabs, especially to a terror state in the Gaza Strip. I am not willing to build a state for the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, the heartland of the Jewish people. And I also find it absolutely appalling that 3 Orthodox Jewish individuals have now signed their names from the United States of America as the negotiating team to a plan that proves, in my estimations, that there is nothing that the state of Israel will not put out for negotiations, and it needs to be remedied. This is a very dangerous plan. I completely oppose the plan, and I do not have any faith that with time it's going to improve in terms of what it offers Israel, Eitan. I'm of the view that it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And when the next administration comes, it's going to say, you know, the parameters that we had for the Palestinians were as they were presented when the plan was unveiled in 2020. But now we have different ideas. And now actually we don't want the Palestinians to change their behavior. And now we're going to force Israel to give here and give more and give more. And I just find it very, very regrettable. And I think the plan should be consigned, frankly, to the dustbin of history, in my opinion, because if the Jewish state is not willing to preserve the capital, Jerusalem, I don't know what this is all about, quite honestly. But let's move to Iran. That's my viewpoint. Everybody's heard your view.
Friends, allow me just to salute you.
I can't hear you, Eitan, and I especially want to hear you. It sounds like you're actually saying something nice too.
I said that allow me to salute you as many soldiers, female and boys like you. Thousands are coming by their own, leaving out their families, joining the IDF. I was commander to such soldiers that are alone here and prefer to serve as a combat soldier, making a great job with much more harder time without the warmth of the circle of their family. And that shows us the power of the Jewish nation all over the world. Secondly, I just would like to tell you maybe 3 points or 3 sentences to complete the Palestinian arena. First of all, at the PA in the West Bank, they already started the process of the day after Abu Mazen. The fight, who will be in charge, or the small team that will control, started. Then you see extremists like Rajub and others that are trying to make their voices. Secondly, Hamas today has no strategy to reduce any violence with Israel. Hamas, led by Sinwar, is looking to cross the corona threat as the threat for their entity in a way that Gaza will stay under their control. That shows you what is the mechanism now that is in the Middle East. Before coming to Tehran, I would like just to cover you that Jordan, as the goalkeeper of the Middle East for Israel from the east side threat, is, I think, a very sensitive time with the corona, with more than half percentage of the population that are Palestinians. So the future of the Kingdom of Jordan is something very sensitive for itself, and they are dependent a lot of the Western world, especially Israel of the States. Now, coming, Benjamin, before to Iran, to the border. Lebanon today is going worse and worse concerning their economy situation, the demonstration, the demand for making a great change in the economy is coming from demonstrations to violence. A lot of anger is signals in the streets, signals towards Hezbollah. Hezbollah in a very sensitive point. On one end, at the time of order, he will fulfill missions, orders from Tehran. Till then, today, there is a very strong opposition from the streets toward Hezbollah in this pressure for being one of the main reasons bring Lebanon to such a bad and terrible economic situation. Lebanon is bubbling. It's good and it's bad on the same time. Just imagine if Israel without Hezbollah make energy agreement with Lebanon that has potential of gas between Lebanon and Israel in the water, economic water of Lebanon, it could be a Pearl Middle East on the western side.
Eitan, are you working on that? Is that something you're working on?
Yes, and I studied from it.
That.
I studied from it as we are looking towards the east side of Israel as the main threat to the existence. I think the west side of Israel, the sea, which in the past was the only way to go and enter to Israel, has become now the unity economy power between Israel, Egypt, Jordan, Cyprus, Greek. I hope also that Erdogan will calculate one day to change, and we will create an area which could supply the needs for the demographic change of the civilians for more energy and for improving the economy. But the main problem today to Israel and to the modern Arab countries and some Western countries, because unfortunately the EU is always sitting on the fence and are making a policy of frightened, etc. I think that Iran today has made till now strategic decision that even with all the damage of losing people, of going down and down with all the economic sanctions from the United States and it becoming worse and worse, they took a strategic decision to try to climb up in a rapid time in order to be able to produce a nuclear threat towards Israel and towards this region. And besides, they are making it without leaving their concept of sending above the legacy of Shiite militias, of Hezbollah as the main front, and improving their arsenal of arms with thousands of missiles that are improving more with warhead that could make a great damage to Israel. And this is the block that we have. If you asked me before, I would leave the issue of the West Bank now and centralize about our future of the situation here with economy and Corona. It can be in a short time. I believe it will take 1 year till we start the stabilization on this area. And by this time, not to give Iranian the option to what they declare and trying to do strategically. And this is the main threat. So recently, there are some events inside Iran that Israel is blamed of some of them of destroying or some explosions on nuclear positions. The main important one was a few days ago in Natanz, while the main, to what I read, I'm not serving now, but to what I read, that this is the, let's say, the smoking pistol for moving ahead and succeed to get a process of producing uranium on 90% with high technological of centrifuges that were already explored and create a delay for something between 1 to 2 years to the Iranian program. If it's true, and I don't know who did it, I think it's the main success that was achieved in the last 2-3 years concerning the issue of the nuclear. Secondly, you see that there is kind of activities above Syria's sky that Israel is blamed of attacking or targeting militias, Shiite militias, and what is always is emphasizing the issue of modern missiles with heavy warheads, direct warheads that are on the way of research, develop, and sending it by convoys to Hezbollah in Lebanon to push it inside Syria. And there is a lot of activities to make a delay or to bring it to withdraw. And the other point is to fight again a very clear Israeli policy in Syria, to push back Iranian forces and Iranian commanders back to the east side towards Iraq and towards Tehran. And this is the main question mark that we will have to deal, that strategically it will be the main issue for Israel for the coming 1 year at least.
So let me ask you some very swift, short points because we've only got a few minutes left. Number one, will Iran gain nuclear capabilities in the coming 3 to 5 years, in your opinion?
Listen, it depends. Iranian has a clear achievement or a clear strategic policy to do it. It depends about joint venture between United States, Israel, European countries, and others to find a way to stop Iran. And the policy, the start that has been signed by President Obama in 2015 and was improving by President Trump, brought Iran to a very big, I think, challenge and problem, besides the babbling of their civilian, how to go on. Till now, they choose to go on to continue. This is the ideology of the Shias, of entity of Iranian. And even they lost their leader, and that was targeted by the Americans. Soleimani. And others, till now, they continue to do it. So, such a joint venture, I hope Israel will not find itself alone. If you told me that the Jews are thinking that Israel will ever be strong, yes, it's true. We will be strong, but we will do what we have to do. But it is much more better in this color world we are living to do it together, much more safe, much more logic, and much more bring, not even for Israel, for billions of people all over the world, better life and better feeling to be what they prefer to be on religious, but not be under unnormal murdering people that are looking that blood is water.
That's a very profound statement, that they view blood as being water there for the spilling. Do you feel, another question, quick question, is the coalition government, and I have to push you for a short answer, is the coalition between Gantz, Netanyahu going to last for the 18 months?
I think it's the only question that I will not be with you direct in this interview. And I really don't know. I know one thing, and I said it loudly. We waste more than 1 year that made Israel weaker economy, weaker society, and in other branches. We cannot have the opportunity ever to spend such a long time without a constant government, without responsibility, and without moving our resources to the places they need to. It's make Israel weaker. So if it's coming to be that party or that party, let the people to decide. But the people has to decide that they can bring it to a solution and not let's say, to a circle that you can never stop and go inside the point.
So then, Eitan, I'm going to conclude now. I just want to first of all, thank you so very much for this interview. You know, every time that I speak to you, I know that any one of the subjects that you speak about, you really could, as I said at the outset, develop it into an entire program. I want to encourage people to read your opinion pieces that are on our website. You're one of our publishing experts. I know that you have a piece coming out in the future. And I hope that people will read that. I want to ask you, please, to come back again in the future. I'd also like to interview you in the near future when I'm back home in Israel. At the moment, I'm quarantined in New York, but I'd very much like to interview you live about any number of subjects. And I also want to just explain to our listeners that you are somebody who's really given the best years of your life in service of the state of Israel. I was on the phone with you yesterday, and you were collecting your daughter from Tel Aviv. She's now a uniformed officer of the IDF. You know, she's signed more time to her service. It's incredible to see that it really does pass from generation to generation. And so on behalf of Rosita and our great and powerful colleague Alan, the Miriam Institute, and everybody on this call, I want to thank you for all of that. But I want to finish with one quote on this peace plan. And people can read about it. It's in an opinion piece that I published along with David Benger, an adjunct at the Miriam Institute, and it was published last week. And it says that, quote, if the American quid is the recognition of Israeli sovereignty over land Israel already legitimately holds, Israel's quo must not be the division of its capital, the anchoring of a Palestinian state in its heartland, and the ceding of further land, and the placement of its citizens in yet greater danger. I am completely opposed to this plan. I think it endangers us, but I really do appreciate you giving your expertise. I know I'm a minority voice. I know that yours is a much more majority voice, but I am informed and instructed by the phrase that says, Im ishkachech Yerushalayim, tishkach yemini tidbak lishoni lechiki. The Jewish people have said for millennia, if I forget thee, O Jerusalem, may my right hand lose its purpose, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of its mouth. It doesn't talk about Netanya or Haifa or Beersheba or Tel Aviv. It talks about Jerusalem. And this plan puts Jerusalem on the altar, and I think it should be, as I said, consigned to the dustbin of history. But the one thing that I want to say to you, Eitan, is I'm very, very grateful that you continue to assign your mind and your expertise to this issue. I know that you continue to advise very closely with the powers that be, and I do believe that if anybody can bring about the regional cooperation that you spoke of with regard to the opportunities there are by way of the discovery of the gas fields offshore, it's you. And so I wish you every possible success with it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you also. It was a pleasure.
And you're such a gracious host. And as ever, I continue to learn from you. Thank you very much, Eitan.
Thank you, and all your team, Rosita and Alan, thank you very much. And I'm sure we will meet in the future. Always remind Jerusalem as the capital.
Amen. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.